what's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking about sensitivity as well as the different types of response curves in Modern Warfare. Keep in mind this entire video is obviously centered around using a controller, not a mouse and keyboard. So if you are a mouse and keyboard user, this video probably isn't for you. But let's just operate into sensitivity to kick it off, and we'll get into the response curves a little bit later on. When it comes to sensitivity, this is really down to personal preference at the end of the day. But just like with every other Call of Duty game, there is generally an accepted range of sensitivity values where most players will find optimal success. There are always going to be outliers here, and at the end of the day, use what works for you, but generally speaking, I would set the accepted range of sensitivity values in Modern Warfare at roughly 3 to 10 sensitivity. Anything lower than a 3 and you're probably going to be holding yourself back quite a bit. If there's ever situations where enemies end up beside you or behind you, you're going to be too slow to react and get on the target. Whereas anything above 10, generally speaking, you're getting diminishing returns. At 10 sensitivity, you can spin around plenty fast to deal with enemies that are beside or behind you. And as you go higher up, you're sacrificing precision. Thumbsticks are not the most precise form of input when it comes to FPS games. And this is the main reason I love using Control Freaks so much. Now yes, I am affiliated with Control Freaks, and you will get 10% off Control Freaks if you use the code exclusive at checkout. I will leave a link down below. But I can't make a sensitivity video without mentioning Control Freaks, because these really do make a big difference by clicking onto your existing thumbstick, and when this happens, it increases the range of motion that you have, which gives you more leverage and finer control over your aim. I use a Control Freak literally 100% of the time I play any video games. Even when I go to capture events, I've got a Control Freak in my pocket ready to go, so I can just pop it on the controller and I'm all set. But back to the topic of sensitivity in Modern Warfare. Like I said, that generally accepted range I consider to be somewhere between 3 and 10. If you fall a little bit outside of that range, that's okay, but you may not be at that optimal point. Now, something I have to address here is I see a lot of people often bragging about the fact that they play on a 20 sensitivity or a maximum sensitivity. And this doesn't make you any better of a player or any cooler for playing on that maximum sensitivity. For some people, if that's truly what they're comfortable with, that's totally fine. But for the vast majority of players, playing on a 20 sensitivity is only going to severely harm your precision in-game, and it's completely unnecessary. Just keep in mind that most professional Call of Duty players will play somewhere within a range of roughly 4 to 7 sensitivity. Now, the way they play Call of Duty is a little bit different than you experience in public matches, and therefore sometimes you might want to go a little bit higher than what the pros would be using, because you don't always have all those callouts and know all the positioning of all the enemy players, and therefore there will be more situations where you have to spin around quickly to react to somebody that's behind you. But I just wanted to make that point that playing on a maximum sensitivity doesn't make you any more skilled or any cooler than anybody else. Now, when it comes to finding your perfect sensitivity, what I'd recommend is just hopping into my aiming drill, which I will leave linked down below. It's effectively a slightly modified version of a free-for-all game against bots on the map Shoot House. And what I'd recommend is try bumping your sensitivity up a little bit from where it's currently at, or down a little bit from where it's currently at, and just playing around with it for a little bit to see what's comfortable and what works for you. Oftentimes, just making a slight adjustment to your sensitivity ends up making a pretty big difference in your overall gameplay. As for my opinion on vertical versus horizontal sensitivity, for me, I personally just like keeping those equal and consistent. I'm currently using a 7 and 7 sensitivity for my horizontal and vertical, and I also use a 0.7 aim down sight multiplier for low zoom guns. Now, the reason I do this is having that 7 and 7 sensitivity allows me to spin around fairly quickly. I can generally react to somebody that's behind me quite fast. But when I aim down sight, this allows me to gain that extra precision when you have this lower multiplier. So I can be a lot more precise when aiming down sight and a lot faster when not aiming down sight. For me, I've found this is the perfect ratio, but this will once again vary depending on the person. Generally speaking though, I wouldn't recommend going above 1 with this multiplier, even though I know that some people really enjoy that. And again, if that's what you enjoy and you're being completely honest with yourself that that's working for you, then by all means, go for it. Now, when it comes to the high zoom aim down sight multiplier, this mainly applies for like sniper rifles, for instance, or if you're using just a high zoom optic on an assault rifle. I do like keeping this one at 1, so that allows me to snap between targets a little bit faster with that high zoom optic. But that pretty much covers it for sensitivity. Definitely something you might want to try playing around with because, like I said, even some small adjustments sometimes can make a pretty big impact on your gameplay performance. But now let's get into the different response curves. This is something I get asked about, I would say on a daily basis at least, on Twitter or in my comment section on YouTube. So it's finally time to address this. We have 3 different types of response curves to choose from in Modern Warfare. We have standard, linear, and dynamic. Now, for those that aren't aware at all, the response curve determines how your aim will react to your inputs with the thumbstick. So if you move your thumbstick a little bit, what does that do to your rotation speed compared to if you're moving your thumbstick a lot? So let's start this off with linear because it is the most basic and easy to explain. The linear response curve basically means if you move your thumbstick 10% more than you were moving it before, your rotation speed is going to increase 10% more. It's a one-to-one sort of an input. Now, the pros to using the linear response curve is consistency. If you move your thumbstick a little bit, your aim will move a little bit. If you move your thumbstick 20% over, your rotation speed will increase by 20%. It's nice and consistent when it comes to that. And as a result, a lot of players absolutely swear by linear, and there's nothing wrong with using the linear response curve at all. However, there are other options that have their own advantages as well. So let's get into the standard response curve now. This is the sort of response curve that we traditionally have in Call of Duty, and with this one, we have a little bit of a ramping effect. So if you move your thumbstick a little bit, your rotation speed will just barely move in relation to how much you're moving that thumbstick. This allows you to be very precise with very small movements with your analog stick. If, however, you push that stick all the way over as far as it'll go, your turning speed will actually accelerate and ramp up quickly, which allows you to get a really quick turn that you simply can't get if you're using the linear response curve, assuming you're using that same sensitivity. So one of the reasons this has been the standard curve that we're used to in Call of Duty is it's a nice balanced curve. It allows for precision with very small movements with your analog stick, whereas large movements will give you a much larger increase to the speed at which you're able to turn. Now, the downside to this is it's not a consistent sort of feeling. It is something you have to practice with and play around with to get a proper feel for. And every Call of Duty game does have a very slightly different curve, it seems. So there's always that little adaptation period when it comes to this. But for me personally, I'll tell you guys right up front, this is what I use for a response curve. I use standard because this is what I'm used to, and I really like the fact that you have that precision with small movements with the analog stick, while also having the ability to ramp that rotation speed up quickly if you need to turn on a dime. But finally, this brings us into the dynamic response curve, which they label as a reverse S-curve. So looking at it on the graph, it would look something like this. And based on my tests as well as their description, essentially, when you first start off moving your analog stick just a small amount, it's going to behave very similar to the linear response curve. Then when you get into the mid-range, where you've got that analog stick about 50% over, things start to flatten out a little bit, so you actually gain a little bit more control on the mid-range, and then when you ramp it all the way over as far as you can, you once again get that really fast rotation speed. Now, based on my testing and my experience with dynamic, you do get a little bit less precision than you would get with the standard response curve with those really small movements. However, this one is a little bit on the snappier side. So if you're trying to snap between 2 targets really quickly, dynamic might be in your best interest compared to standard. And it also has the benefit of having a little bit more control on the mid-range than you would with the linear response curve, because it will slow down a little bit if you need that slowdown. So if I had to label these in their most basic form, I would say the standard response curve is for the people that want that nice balance of precision while also having acceleration at their disposal. I personally really like that one. Then we have linear for the nice consistent feeling. And finally, we have dynamic, which I guess the best way to describe it is it's the snappier sort of feel. You don't really have that super precision or anything, but you do have a bit more precision on the mid-range, allowing you to snap between targets a little bit more effectively. Now, just like with sensitivities, response curve really does come down to your personal preference at the end of the day. Like I said, I personally strongly prefer the standard response curve. And for people that have been playing Call of Duty for many years, that's probably going to be what you'd be most comfortable with as well. However, I do encourage you guys to play around a little bit with the other curves because it might turn out that for you and your playstyle and the way you handle a controller, one of the other response curves just works better. And with this video, it's not about telling you what to use, it's just telling you how things work so you can decide for yourself what works best for you. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Like I said, I do encourage you guys to play around with these settings while doing my aiming drill, which I will leave linked down below, like I said. And also that other link I do encourage you to check out because it does relate to all of this. That is the aim assist video. It's important to know the different aim assist types and which one is best to use for you and the gun that you're using, because my aim assist recommendation actually changes depending on which gun you're using. So you might want to check that one out if you guys haven't already. But with that, I'm just interested to hear from you guys. First off, what is your preferred sensitivity? And second, which response curve do you prefer in Modern Warfare? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.